I got asked a question this week. Actually, I got asked two questions this week. One question is, who are you always texting up there during the service? And it's not like friends and stuff. Well, it is friends, but it's Trish and Vicky in the back. Usually we're talking about things back and forth because there's always a couple things that aren't working the way we should. So that's who I'm usually texting. The second question is this. So we've been talking about the need to take up our cross to be disciples of Jesus. What is the cross that we're taking up? Pretty good question, isn't it? And so I gave a correct answer, because that's my job as the pastor, to give a correct answer. And we talked about the fact that the idea of taking up that cross is instead of being served, that we serve, and the need to let go of the things sometimes that we think that we need in order to follow Jesus. And so a decent answer, but the question stuck with me all throughout the rest of the week. So the answer that I gave, while correct, I started to think, well, that's not necessarily true. And I started thinking about the crosses that we all carry. Because here's the truth of the matter. We don't have to go around looking for crosses, do we? The crosses are there. The cross is the diagnosis that we get of cancer or heart disease that all of the sudden we're burdened with and carrying around with us. The cross that we bear is having school-age kids at home and working full-time and figuring out how you're even going to make it to the end of the week. The cross that we have to bear is caring for a spouse or a partner that's ill, and what that takes from us and of us. There's all different crosses that we bear. A cross that we bear is looking at the world the way it is and coming to the conclusion that's not really sustainable. And so what in the world do we do with that and do about that? The crosses are there. So I had to call that person back later in the week, and we talked about it further. And so I think what maybe Jesus is saying is, I know you have the cross. Maybe the invitation is, I'm inviting you not to just be the victim of that cross, nor am I inviting you to see yourselves as needing to be the victor of that cross. Maybe the invitation is to take up our cross, whatever it is, in the midst of our circumstances, and follow Jesus and see what comes from that. A couple of weeks ago, the cross that rich young ruler had to bear seems to be a dissatisfaction of life. Had everything that he was supposed to have, was doing everything that he was supposed to do, and yet something was missing. So he came to the teacher and said, what is it that I have to do to have life worth living? The cross that James and John had to bear in last week's scripture passage was this need to see themselves glorified, the need to see themselves as rulers of the age, And so they asked Jesus, can one of us sit on your left and one of us sit on your right? And Jesus said, that's not mine to give. But you know what? Follow me, and let's see what happens. The cross that Bartimaeus had to bear in this morning's service was the fact that he was blind, and the fact that he was a beggar. So he had this double whammy against him. His body wasn't whole, so he was unclean according to religious law of the time. And he lived just constantly on the kindness of strangers. As we mentioned earlier, no stranger to asking for help. It's hard to do, isn't it? Asking for help, to the extent that most of us, many of us, don't do it even when we need to. There's something untoward, we feel, about having to ask for help, to the extent that one of the most famous commercials of the past 10 or 15 years is, remember the lady that's wearing the help button, and she falls over and she cries out, "Help, I can't get up." And for a decade, we've just been laughing about that. I think that reflects the understanding and the feeling of our society about asking for help. What did the people around Jesus, the insiders of the movement, do when Bartimaeus started asking for help? They tried to quiet him down. Shh, that's not appropriate. And yet for Bartimaeus, it was completely appropriate. It was completely necessary. In her book, Mayday, Asking for Help in Times of Need, Nora Claver talks about this a lot, that we live in a society that we've been just brainwashed into thinking that what is important is our independence, that we can and that we must do everything by ourselves. And to ask for help is a sign of weakness. It's kind of ingrained in us. The story of how our nation came to be and how it won its